Christine Brown was always the pulse of the Brown family, in her own unassuming, rock-solid way. Her existence, tastefully stitched together with love, responsibility, and selfless sacrifice, had been characterized by the complex tapestry of a polygamous home. Each new day presented challenges, balancing with her sisters-in-law, keeping the kids' schedules straight, playing money games. But Christine had mastered them with poise and grit. She took pride in her skill at keeping peace among a household where turmoil hovered just out of sight. But that night, everything shifted. She had spent the afternoon and evening alone in the living room, the warm amber light of the lamps casting delicate shadows on the walls. The house was still for a change. The children were in their bedrooms. Daytime laughter switched out with an uncommon quiet. Christine's hands shook a little as she grasped the letter that had arrived earlier in the mail, the letter that she had originally written off as mere bureaucratic forms. But the moment her eyes read the pages, a cold, sinking sensation clutched at her chest. Kody, her husband, the man she loved, trusted, and shared a life with. He had made a money decision, one that threatened not only the financial security of her family, but also the very cornerstone of trust she had worked so hard to build. It wasn't an error in judgment, it was a betrayal. Christine settled into the couch, her mind reeling as the particulars presented themselves to her. Investments were made without asking, funds siphoned off in secret, and homes pledged for the sake of family expansion suddenly put at risk. The consequences were overwhelming, not only for the financial security of their home, but for the emotional and psychological well-being of everyone she loved. For all the years she had been silenced, as if her opinions, her instincts, her own voice were less important. She had endured stress, overridden rumors of discontent, and kept up a composed facade for the children's sake. But now, amid the stillness of her living room, she couldn't help but acknowledge the reality. Her voice had been intentionally disregarded, her faithfulness presumed, and her love manipulated. Christine's eyes welled up with tears as she thought back to her years with Kody. The memories, once warm, now stung like shards of glass. She recalled the beginning of their marriage, full of laughter, hope, and visions of life constructed together. The thrill of new beginnings, the delight of having children bring her into the world, and the mutual vow to a family arrangement that was unorthodox but, in her eyes, sacred. She had thought that they were in this together, trusted that they would make decisions that involved the family collectively. Now, all of those memories were contaminated with the acid of betrayal. She found herself replaying instances where she was ignored, dismissed, or relegated to the sideline. Discussions that were supposed to be a collective discussion sounded more like monologues of compliance. Secrets spoken in the darkness of night had been breached, and the intangible burden of compromise had finally broken. Christine's heart hurt, not only for the money or material possessions that were at stake, but for the loss of trust, the very fabric that had cemented her marriage and family. Her mind seesawed between anger and sadness. Anger with Kody for his duplicity, for the temerity to play with the safety of their children and home. Anger with herself for failing to recognize it earlier, for freely offering her trust in the belief that love and commitment would rule their decisions. But along with the outrage, there was sadness, a deep sorrow over the loss of innocence, for the awareness that the individual whom she had trusted most had valued ambition and concealment above truth and collaboration. Christine could feel her heart rate quicken as the magnitude of what was happening weighed heavily on her. The implications were not merely monetary. In fact, they were also emotional, legal, and intensely personal. She realized that dealing with Kody was not going to be easy. The Brown family dynamic was complex, intertwined with love, loyalty, and decades of lived lives. There would be pushback, resistance, and even ridicule. And still, a voice inside her urged that she could no longer keep quiet. Silence had fostered this betrayal. Silence had permitted her contributions, her instincts, and her viewpoint to be devalued. And silence was no longer going to be able to shield the children, the family, or herself. Christine's eyes rested on the family pictures along the walls, happy faces of children who trusted her absolutely, siblings-in-law whose lives were entangled with hers. Moments frozen in time that now felt tenuous. She knew the stakes were not just about personal deception. They were about preserving the emotional and material health of all those she loved. Every kid was owed a future free of clandestine choices and wanton gambles. Every member of her family was owed a leader she could trust with her life. And she, Christine Brown, owed it to herself to regain that voice and that leadership before it was too late. A resolve started to take the place of the initial shock. Christine's mind, honed by years of navigating family dynamics, started thinking strategically. She could sense the familiar rush of determination that had propelled her through adversity in the past. This was greater, more intimate, and far more agonizing. But she was accustomed to hardship. Her life had required resilience, patience, and prudent judgment. And now, those strengths would benefit her in a way that they never had before. Christine picked up her phone, her fingers shaking minutely as she wrote to her dearest friend. She needed advice, encouragement, and someone to grasp the personal and practical aspects of what she was going through. Each typed word weighed with significance. A silent agreement that her life was set to alter beyond recognition. As she sent the message, shivers coursed through her body. It was too late to go back. The secret had been exposed, the betrayal obvious, and the road ahead would be full of obstacles, confrontation, and emotional upheaval. And yet, within the uncertainty and the fear, there was also a flame of something she had not known in a long time: empowerment. For years, she had been living within a world where her voice was silenced, her opinions marginalized, and her loyalty assumed. But now, the time called for courage, clarity, and conviction. She would no longer be a bystander in the narrative of her own life. She would stand, she would speak, and she would fight, not in spite, but out of a fierce, unshakable commitment to justice, to integrity, and to the family she loved more than anything else. Christine sat back into the couch, drawing a deep, steadying breath. The living room was silent, but the hurricane within her head whirled with passion. There would be plans to be made, words to be spoken, and choices to be made. She was aware that dealing with Kody, going through the family's response, and possibly facing the courts would emotionally drain and be complicated. However, for the first time in a long time, Christine experienced a sense of clarity that pierced the haze of hurt and confusion. It wasn't about the money. It was about respect. It was about love. It was about trust. And Christine Brown, with every ounce of her soul, knew that she would no longer stand by and watch those pillars of her life be undermined without repercussions. The betrayal had been exposed, and with that exposure came a decision: stay silent and complicit, or stand up, confront, and reclaim her voice. Her mind was made up. Christine would fight, not for herself, but for the family for whom she had given her life. And in that peaceful living room, surrounded by memories of a life constructed in love, she gave herself permission for a small, fierce grin. The fight to come would be tough, the way uncertain, but Christine Brown was ready. Ready to meet the betrayal, ready to meet Kody, and ready to walk into a storm that would alter her life and her family's forever. The night was endless, and sleep had deserted Christine Brown. She huddled alone at her kitchen table, one lamp spilling a warm pool of light that barely reached the borders of the room. Her own hands, still shaking slightly with the shock of what she had discovered, grasped a mug of cold, untouched tea. It had been half an hour since she had poured it, but the contents were now cold, abandoned, as her thoughts rewound the day's events in a never-ending reel. Each corner of her brain was filled with one question: how could he, Kody Brown, the man she had promised to stand by, the children's father, the partner she had trusted without question, had violated her trust in a manner that rocked the foundation of her existence? Christine experienced the all-too-familiar burn of tears, pricking the corners of her eyes, an anguished mixture of hurt, rage, and incredulity. She had kept herself together for the family's sake for years, stifling doubts and disagreements, ironing over tensions, and keeping things running at home. She had been the unobtrusive glue that stuck everything together, and in this one thing, it had all given way. Christine rested her forehead against the chill of the table, taking a trembling breath. She felt the burden of history weighing on her, the compromises she had made, the sleepless nights spent watching over them, the times she had put aside her own ambitions for family peace. She remembered the children in their bedrooms, innocent of the turmoil that was brewing in the heart of their household. She recalled the dreams she had shared with Kody, dreams of a life founded on trust, respect, and mutual decisions. And she remembered that those dreams were shattered, maybe beyond repair. The quiet of the house was reassuring and terrifying at the same time. No voices to distract her from her own thoughts. No distractions to ward off the reality. Only the stark intensity of her feelings. Christine's thoughts swung between fear and resolve. If I stand up to him squarely, what will he do? Will he deny it? Will he turn the family against me? These questions tormented her, each one a painful thorn of fear and uncertainty. And yet, under the fear, something began to spark that sense of determination. Christine was not a woman who could live in silence as injustice happened around her. She had always been the witness, the peacemaker, the one who suffered silently for the sake of peace. But this betrayal was different. This was not a misstep or a miscalculation. This was a deliberate choice that had consequences for her family, her children, and her sense of self-worth. Christine's fingers clenched the mug. She recalled all the times she had swallowed her voice, the times she had let compromise override conviction. She had done it for the protection of the family, for maintaining unity, and for averting conflict. But now, she knew that real protection involved doing something, not saying nothing. She needed to regain her power, her voice, and her dignity. Her mind returned to the legal facts. Taking Kody to court would be intimidating. The public attention, the emotional toll, the possible backlash. It was horrific, but she knew that doing nothing would be worse. Christine was a woman of principle. She'd lived a lifetime protecting the welfare of the people she cared about. If this betrayal went unpunished, it would destroy everything she had built, leaving the children at risk, and the family shattered. Tears slid silently down her face as she came to a decision. The terror that had clutched her heart was still present, but it was joined now by courage. The kind of courage that surfaces in times of need, fueled by love, justice, and the desire to safeguard what is most important. Christine was aware that fighting with Kody would be emotionally draining. There would be battles, protests, and maybe even attacks on her personally. But the other option, being silent and complicit, was not something she could abide. She imagined herself in a courtroom, her voice firm, speaking truth to the betrayal she'd suffered. She envisioned shock, etched on the faces of the people who had underestimated her, the power of evidence she had carefully built, and vindication of finally being believed. It was a frightening picture, but it was also empowering. Christine knew she had been preparing for this moment her whole life, through strength, resilience, and unshakable devotion to family. Her thoughts then shifted to the logistics. She would require evidence, witnesses, and a plan of action. She would have to guard against emotional damage, as she played out a public ordeal that would surely reveal family secrets and private heartache. But in spite of the daunting road yet to be traveled, Christine sensed an odd sense of clarity. She could no longer be controlled by fear. The betrayal had already cost her dearly. The only way to go forward was through confrontation and responsibility. Christine wiped away her tears, hands shaking but determination strengthening. She picked up her phone again, writing to faithful friends and lawyers. Every sentence was intended, thoughtfully written, a statement of purpose, a warning that she would not back down. The storm within had lessened just enough to provide direction. She would proceed, step by step, with courage and purpose, no longer silent, no longer complicit. It was settled. Christine would be going to court, not to seek revenge, not for anger, but for justice, respect, and the sake of her family. She would defend the truth, even if it meant confronting the very individuals she had loved and trusted most. As she rested back in her chair, fatigue and strain etched on her face, Christine experienced a peculiar combination of fear and relief. The burden of indecision was gone. The road ahead was unknown, but it was hers to travel. And for the first time in far too long, Christine felt the quiet power of a woman finding again her voice, her power and her dignity. In the silence of the night, with only the faint hum of the refrigerator to keep her company, Christine Brown spoke to herself, "I will not be silenced. I will not be broken. I will fight." And so, with those words, the first moves towards an emotional, intense, and life-changing courtroom fight were underway. The courtroom was chill, antiseptic, and daunting. The sort of space that commanded respect but had the potential to strip away each and every layer of emotional armor Christine had developed over the years. She sat near the front, her hands locked in a tight knot in her lap, her thoughts churning through every possible outcome. Surrounding her, the smooth wood of the benches, the serious faces of the judge and jury, and the quiet rustle of papers all served to remind her that this was no longer an internalized fight. This was public, official, and permanent. Kody sat on the opposite side of the room, calm and self-assured, surrounded by his attorney, his eyes a blend of defiance and surprise. He had braced himself for opposition, indeed, but he had not counted on Christine's determination. For years maybe, he had misjudged her voice, assuming silence and compromise to be her weapons. Now Christine knew. It was too late for that fantasy. The bailiff declared the court in session, and the judge's gavel came down with authority, ringing out like a warning. Christine took a deep breath and centered herself. She had prepared well, amassing documents, bank records, witness statements, and evidence of the decisions Kody made without her involvement. It was not merely about finances. It was about accountability, respect, and the emotional betrayal she had suffered for so long. As the trial opened, Kody's attorney stood first, providing an assertive account of his client's motives. He testified about business choices, family planning, and misunderstandings that were supposed to have led Christine to overreact. The courtroom whispered with courteous acceptance, but Christine could feel a wave of outrage building in her chest. She gripped her fists under the table, holding on, reminding herself that restraint would prove to be her most powerful tool. When it was her turn, Christine rose. Her legs shook a little, but her voice, while soft to begin with, increased in strength with each sentence. She spoke of sacrifices she had made on behalf of the family, of hours spent caring for children, running households, and keeping peace among co-wives. Every sentence was weighted with feeling, and every silence was charged with the truth. I believed him, she explained, her gaze darting to Kody. I believed in partnership, and I believed that family decisions would be made together. But that trust was shattered, not just once, but over and over. This isn't about money. It's about respect, love, and integrity. And I'm not going to stand by while the foundation of my family is destroyed. The courtroom was still. Some jurors fidgeted in their seats. A few of Kody's supporters were whispering anxiously. Christine experienced a thrill of empowerment, as the truth hung suspended in the air like an unspoken accusation. For years she had been belittled, dismissed, and silenced. Yet here now, she was in charge of the story. The day went on with witness testimony. Friends, family members, and financial advisors, each bringing out fragments of the puzzle, tidbits of hidden bank accounts, unauthorized property deals, and shady investments, all made it clear. Kody had proceeded independently, ignoring Christine and the family's voice. The courtroom was charged with emotion, each discovery a knife to the masterfully built front of harmony Kody had attempted to establish. Christine's heart raced as she laid out the most incriminating evidence. Letters and emails chronicling her persistent efforts to talk to Kody about these choices. Efforts dismissed or ignored. The jury leaned forward, transfixed by her candor and emotional openness. She was not merely reciting facts. She was telling the tale of a life upended, a trust broken, and a woman compelled to stand up for her family. Kody's facade cracked. His mannered confidence broke down as questions from Christine's attorney revealed contradictions in his testimony. He fidgeted in his chair, aware that the truth was getting away from him. Christine's eyes never left his face. She did not talk in order to shame, but to establish a truth he had been in denial of for so long. Every question, every bit of evidence, forced him deeper into a corner he could no longer leave. There were flashes of raw drama, the kind that made everyone in the room hold their breath. A witness unveiled a hidden transaction, something that went against everything Kody had professed. Soft gasps circulated among the onlookers. Kody's attorney attempted to deflect, to downplay, but Christine's meticulous preparation and calm demeanor made every effort futile. It was as though the courtroom itself had changed sides, quietly acknowledging the righteousness of her cause. Throughout, Christine's feelings were raw, but controlled. Anger ebbed and flowed. Grief threatened to crack her facade, but she clung. Her children's faces popped into her head. Innocent, trusting, deserving of stability and honesty. All her words were for them, for the family she had sacrificed so much to keep safe. By late afternoon, the theatrical drama in the courtroom had come to a head. Kody's credibility was challenged, his motives probed, and the emotional burden of Christine's testimony hovered over the room like a thundercloud. The jury was entranced, the audience transfixed, and Christine, tired and afraid, felt a profound sense of vindication. She had been heard, she had been seen, and she had battled with the strength and honor that characterized her life. As the day came to a close, Christine stepped out of the courtroom for a moment, into the still hallway. She rested against the chill of the marble wall, her eyes closed, attempting to sort through the tumult of feelings. Relief, fear, hope, and sadness fought inside of her. The battle was by no means over. The verdict had not been read, but Christine felt she had made a giant leap. She had converted years of pain and betrayal to action. When she came back to her seat, Kody's gaze caught hers. There was tension, defensiveness, and maybe a spark of recognition. He had underestimated her for far too long. And now, under the spotlight, his decisions were no longer kept under wraps, behind secrecy and expectation. Christine had taken back her voice, her presence, and her power. The drama in the courtroom was only just beginning, but Christine Brown had already gained something precious: respect for her truth, and the understanding that silence could no longer be an option. It was legal, emotional, and personal. Yet Christine was willing to fight it out, whatever the price. The courtroom had been charged all morning, the atmosphere heavy with tension, the judge's gavel ringing like a drumbeat to all of their suspense. Christine Brown sat still, her fingers gripping each other in her lap, her chest heaving as her heart pounded against the ribs. Every sense was tuned into what was going on, to the words being spoken, and to the truth that she had struggled so desperately to uncover. Kody sat opposite her, his calm, or at least trying to look it. His carefully constructed confidence was starting to break, though, and Christine felt it like an electric shock through the air. He had overestimated himself, overestimated how far she would go, and overestimated the loyalty of the people who had agreed to stand behind her cause. The day had been long, testimonies had been given, accounting papers had been examined, and with every morsel of information, the story Kody's attorneys had so meticulously constructed had been eroded. But Christine had a sense there was much further to go. Her stomach was knotted with worry, as she awaited her attorney's introduction of the next paramount piece of evidence. A piece that she hoped would finally reveal the true depth of the deceit. And then it came. Her attorney stood, making his way slowly to the front of the courtroom with a fat folder full of documents and a USB drive in his hand. The room was quiet. All eyes were on the attorney as he spoke with controlled authority, recounting that new evidence had been revealed. Evidence that went against everything Kody had sworn to under oath. Christine's breath caught. She had viewed this evidence only a few days ago, concealed in accounting records and letters that no one was supposed to find. The evidence was irrefutable: secret accounts, hidden investments, and clandestine transactions that put the assets of the family at risk, unbeknownst to Christine. For the very first time, the reality of the deception was revealed for all to witness. The proof was displayed on the big courtroom screen, every page underlined with explanation and timestamps that left no question. Soft gasps filled the room as the witnesses and jurors digested the meaning. Kody's attorney tried to interrupt, with claims of confusion or error, but the pages were unambiguous. The backroom negotiations were intentional, calculated, and accomplished without openness or discussion. Christine experienced a swirl of feelings: vindication, relief, and a bitter heartache, all commingling. She had always been aware of the truth in her own heart, but to see it accepted openly was both empowering and heart-wrenching. The betrayal she had experienced in secret was now open for all to see, and the weight of years of silenced heart began to shift, even if just a little. Kody's face went white, his tightly guarded composure faltering with every additional piece of information. The jury inched closer, mesmerized by the drama unfolding. As Christine's attorney calmly outlined the ramifications of Kody's behavior, not only financially, but emotionally, socially, and legally. Every morsel struck with the force of a hammer, shattering the carefully crafted spin Kody had worked so assiduously to create. The hushed tones in the courtroom swelled, a blend of shock and fascination. Even Kody's own followers could no longer escape the reality. Christine's children, seated quietly in the observation area, exchanged concerned looks, feeling the strain but believing in their mother's fortitude. Each document, each witness statement, each meticulous interpretation drew Christine nearer justice, not for herself, but for the family she had given her life to shield. The most heart-stopping moment was when Christine's lawyers brought in a financial analyst to confirm the effects of the secret transactions. The analyst's tone was steady but commanding, recounting step by step how Kody's secret choices had put the stability of the family at risk. Christine could feel the tears brimming at the corners of her eyes, not of vulnerability, but of feeling the release of so much emotion as she saw the truth finally acknowledged. Kody's gaze locked with hers across the courtroom, a flash of something Christine had never witnessed: fear. He had always used control, manipulation, and secrecy to hold power, but now, with those means stripped away from him, he was exposed. Christine understood in that instant that the fight wasn't only about prevailing in court, it was about taking back her dignity, her voice, and her power. As the day ended, the judge ordered a short recess. Christine walked out into the corridor, her hands shaking but her shoulders straight. She had been subjected to unimaginable emotional strain, revealed deep personal deceptions, and yet she had held firm. The turn of evidence had completely altered the course of the case, and for the first time, she felt a tremor of optimism. Her attorney walked toward her, putting a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You did it," he said gently. "You held your ground. The evidence is good. This might turn it all around." Christine nodded, relief and exhaustion, tears streaming down her face. She knew the battle was a long way from over, but the turn of events had tipped the scales. The betrayal that had haunted her for so long was now fully revealed, and the truth had finally found a voice. As she returned to the courtroom, Christine was filled with determination and hopeful trepidation. The jury had heard the evidence, the truth was out, and Kody's grip on spin was disintegrating. She had converted years of silence and repression into action, and now the road to justice, although still fraught with danger, was more visible than ever. Christine Brown had weathered the tempest, and now, with the truth in hand, she was determined to fight the battle to its final end. The courtroom was quiet, as the judge was poised to render the verdict. Christine Brown sat in the front row of the crowded room, her hands lightly placed on her lap, but her chest weighed down with anticipation. Months of tension and betrayal, of emotional ups and downs, had culminated in this moment. All the late nights spent worrying, all the tears cried in secret, all the sleepless hours debating if she had the guts to stand her ground. It all boiled down to this moment. Kody sat across from her, his expression a mask of defended self-assurance. But Christine saw the cracks in his facade. The proof put before him, the testimonies of the witnesses, and the documents that stood irrefutable, had all counted against him. For the first time in years, he was not in command, and Christine felt a quiet, unbreakable strength blanket her. The judge cleared his throat, and every eye in the room was on the bench. After considering the evidence, testimonies, and documents presented by both sides, the court rules in favor of Christine Brown. The words hung suspended in the air like a clap of thunder. Christine was met with a rush of overwhelming relief, tears welling instantly in her eyes. She had emerged victorious, not in spite, not in vengeance, but in justice, in respect, and for the family she'd fought to defend. Her heart overflowed with mixed emotions. There was victory, of course, the vindication of being heard, the validation of the betrayal, and the legal affirmation of her rights. But there was also sorrow. She considered the years wasted in silence, the trust broken, and the family relationships that would never be again. Even in triumph, she felt the wound of the lasting effect of betrayal. Christine's children, sitting subdued in the gallery, gazed at their mother with wide, appreciative eyes. She had braved a tempest most adults would be afraid to touch. But she had come out stronger, more resilient, and fiercely guarding the one she loved most. At that moment, Christine understood that the struggle had never been about money or property at all. It had been about getting her voice back, about claiming her worth, and proving to her family that betrayal would not be their legacy. Cody's expression was inscrutable, a combination of shock, anger, and maybe a growing respect. He had misjudged Christine's determination, believing her reserved nature implied submission. But Christine had illustrated that strength wouldn't always yell. At times, it would be the quiet, unshakable resolve that hit the hardest. Christine felt the burden of months fall from her shoulders as she exited the courtroom. The tension that had followed her every step, the sleepless nights tormented by fear and doubt, started to melt into an inner sense of peace. She was aware the road ahead would be difficult. Family dynamics, especially within a polygamous family, were complicated and charged with emotion. Repairing trust, learning to live and interact with Kody and the other wives, and assisting her children in healing the trauma would take time. And Christine felt something different in herself, a sense of empowerment that could not be diminished. She had confronted the betrayal outright, withstood the glare of the courtroom, and had walked away with dignity intact. She had found her voice again, and with it she had taught her children the strength of courage, resilience, and self-respect. In the peaceful hours following the trial, Christine thought about how she'd arrived at this place. The betrayal had ravaged her, the choices wrenching, and the way ahead unclear. But the triumph, albeit sweetened by bitterness, was deep. It was more than a victory in law. It was a personal, emotional one. Tears streamed down freely as Christine hugged her children, the weight of the moment settling in. She had struggled for them, for herself, and for what was right. And even though the pain of betrayal would always linger, the victory of justice and self-honor would endure. Stepping out of the courthouse, the fall sun on her face, Christine Brown experienced a peaceful sense of rebirth. The turmoil had raged and passed, leaving wounds, yes, yet clarity, fortitude, and the understanding that she was prepared to meet any difficulty with courage and integrity. Her voice had been muffled for far too long, her trust betrayed, and her heart tried in ways unthinkable. But Christine now knew one absolute truth. Nothing could dislodge the strength, dignity, and resilience within her minners. No betrayal, no deception, no tempest. As the courthouse doors closed behind her, Christine drew a deep, centering breath. She was free, free to heal, free to rebuild, and free to live in the knowledge that she had struggled for what was right, and that she had won, even in her sorrow. Christine Brown's path had been terrible, painful, and transforming. She had battled betrayal, defied convention, and come out not only victorious, but more resilient, more discerning, and indomitable. And in that triumph, in the middle of tears and victory, she had won back something much more precious than money or court approval. She had won back herself.